This is a story which happened 70 years ago. No, maybe even more. Maybe even more. Must have been that it happened almost 100 years ago. 100 years ago. This is in Tsarist Russia. In Tsarist Russia. And it's SIMCHAT Torah. And someone happened, a Jewish fellow, maybe a Chabad Chassid, he was on the road, and somehow or other he had to spend SIMCHAT Torah in the strange town where there were only Jews, and the Jews are called Cantonists. Cantonists were Jews that had been taken by the government, the Tsarist government, inducted into the army forcefully when they were children. And they tried to make them change the religion. And because they thought there was, saving the world, everybody has to believe like they do, Russian Orthodox. Okay, so this is the Cantonist. Anyway, so they were dancing, or it was a synagogue where there were Cantonists, Jews that were there. Most of these children, the people that were taken as inducted into the Russian army, this was under Tsar Nicholas. But it started even in the time of the first Rebbe of Chabad, by Alexander. That was their idea, that they were going to get the Jews away from Judaism by taking the children. That's what we just finished learning, and indoctrinating them into the Russian army, and then they would be stop being Jews, and they would start being whatever it is, Russian Orthodox or whatever religion that these people had. Anyway, so the dancing was in a fervor on SIMCHAT Torah, dancing around, and there was one Jew especially that he was a Cantonist. He had been a Cantonist Jew when he was young, and he was really dancing. He was maybe in his 50s or something, but he was just dancing and sweating and dancing. They couldn't dance anymore. They had to sit down. So someone came over, sat next to him, and said, "Well, I see you really dancing." He said, "I'm just catching my breath. I'm going to go back and dance again." And he said, "You want to know why I'm so happy? Why I'm so happy? On SIMCHAT Torah, why am I so happy? All right, these Cantonists, most of them being in the army over there, it destroyed their lives. So that they weren't able really to get along with people anymore, and they went." But he was happy, and also when he was dancing, so his shirt opened up. It was sweating. Shirt opened up, and saw these horrendous scars that were on. So the person sat next to him, and he said, "Tonight is the happiest night of my life. I'm dancing with the Torah. I'm so happy with the Torah." He said, "You see all these medals that I've got, all the scars that he's got. See, these are my medals, my medals from war. From war. What type of war?" So he said, when he was 8 years old, 9 years old, the Russian army took him and inducted him into the army. How did they do that? There were Jews that were called chappers, and they would come into cities and act normal. They would come into cities, make friends with people, talk to people, and they would take note where the children were, which families had children, and where they were. Now, usually, parents tried to hide their children because they knew that if somebody came from the Russian government, that they were going to try to take the children. But they didn't suspect. And these people, Jews, chappers, and they would get money for this. I mean, I don't, if there's a special place in hell for these people, it could be. So they would take the children. So that's what happened to him. One night there came into the town these Cossacks or whatever, and they knew exactly where the children were and where they were hidden in which families, and they took him away. And his mother was crying, and she was begging, and the child said, he said, "I was just a child then, and they took me away." And I said, "Don't worry, mommy, I'm going to keep being a Jew." And my mother was saying, "Don't forget you're a Jew. Don't forget you're a Jew." And I said, "Don't worry, mommy, I promise you, I'm never going to leave my Judaism," which was a pretty potent a promise and a very almost impossible one to keep, because the whole reason they took them into the army was to wean them away from their Judaism, and especially the way they did it, they weren't so good at, convincing people like the communists were. Their big thing was just brute force. So they tried to keep the children, they tried to starve them, they tried to give them not kosher meat to eat, and they told them it was kosher. They want anything that they do, and he held on. He held out. He said, I held on to my Judaism, and at first they just beat us a little bit and they starved us a little bit because they wanted us to see that they're nice guys and they're nice people and that we would, join them. But eventually they became more and more violent. Until finally one day, they one day they beat me, and they beat me to the degree that I was just about to, I didn't know what to do. And they said, in 3 days, we're going to, they said, you have to, if you convert, that's what they said. If you convert, if you just leave your Judaism, what do you get from Judaism? You just get beaten and just, you leave your religion, you convert, and we'll give you a warm bed. We'll treat you nice. We'll give you good food to eat. We'll give you kosher food to eat. We'll give you anything that you want. So it was 3 days. They gave me 3 days. And all this time, they kept beating me for 3 days. So at one point, I fell asleep. And I had a dream. And I dreamt that I was being washed away by a big river. I was in a big current. And I grabbed at a stick to stay me, a stick came by. And that stick became like a part of a big, long chain. Whether it was a metal chain or a wood chain, but it was a long, long chain. It was a long chain, and I traced this chain. I pulled myself to the chain, and I saw that the chain was a chain of Judaism. Eventually, I got to Moses, and I got to Abraham, a long chain. And they said that if you leave Judaism, you're breaking the chain where you are. You're breaking the chain. You're leaving this long chain of self-sacrifice. And I screamed out, no, I won't do it. I won't do it. And they took me into a room, and they said, are you willing to change your religion? And 3 days, I said, give me 3 days to think about it. And they took me into this big room, and I was so weak and so that I said, all right. And they stood me in front of everybody, and they said, this is a young man, in front of all the children. All the other children says, this young man has decided on the right path, the correct path, because they thought I was going to convert. They thought he was the correct path, and he has changed his religion, and you should do the same thing also. And when they said that, I stood up very proudly, and I noticed when I came in that there were 2 swords on the wall, crossed, 2 swords, as a sign. And so I took one of the swords, and they thought I was going to yell out, long live the Tsar or something. I took the swords and I put these 2 fingers on the table. I left my middle finger because that's where you wrap the tefillin. I took these 2 fingers and I raised the sword. I chopped off my 2 fingers, and blood was all over the place. And everyone was screaming and yelling, and all the guards said, and the guards said, take him away. I said, I don't know how I lived. I survived. Somehow or other the blood stopped. Whatever, maybe the other people stopped it. And after that, they left me alone. After that, they realized that all their efforts in me were going nowhere, and they left me alone. And I was in the army. I served in the Russian army, and I got out. He said, but now this, he said, this is my sign. This is my medal, that I held on to the Torah. I did not leave the Torah. And I kept my promise to my mother that I held on to Judaism. And now, Sisu v'simchas Torah. And he stood up and he started to dance again. And that's the history of the Jewish people. The joy of the Jewish people is that we can hold on to the truth. And even though this is connected with many terrible sacrifices, but the truth it's worth it, whatever price there is to pay. Have a good day. Have a happy holiday with Mashiach now, but we will learn tomorrow, God willing. We will learn tomorrow, even though we're staying up all night tonight, but we will learn tomorrow. Shalom uvracha. God bless you all with Mashiach now.